Hi everyone, I'm Mike Messinio.
I'm Stephen Sigmund.
Welcome to the Weekly Movie Throwdown. This week, we're continuing Dev Patel month with Dev Patel's directorial debut, Monkey Man. And we're going to talk about how you can stab someone in the throat with a knife in your teeth.
Do you remember me? Do you even know my mother's name? Do you know any of their names? When I was a boy, they took everything from me. The rich don't see us as people. To them, we're animals.
Both of us. We're broken.
If a man wishes to challenge the gods, he must become more than a man. He must become a beast.
Who is he?
Nobody. Just some crazy kid from the gutter.
He has to be extinguished.
Before your nobody becomes a somebody.
Just one small ember can burn down everything.
Make them remember your name.
Are you ready?
Yeah. Do you remember me now?
Monkey Man is finally here. Wow, it feels like there's been so much build up to this film for like 6 months or something.
I was going to say, I mean, not just the 6 months, but I think this is one of those movies where the movie about the making of the movie could almost be as interesting as the movie itself. I mean, this has been years and almost a decade in the making, really. This is, Dev Patel's kind of passion project for most of his life now, most of his adult life.
Yeah, and kudos to him right off the bat. I mean, it's ambitious and it's really well made. I loved watching it. Was it as good as I wanted it to be? Probably not. And I think a big part of that is some of those production issues that you just mentioned. And I'm sure we'll get into that because that is a huge part of it. But, just to give a quick synopsis, it's Monkey Man is about Dev Patel's character, who I believe is called Kid, and later Bobby. And he kind of lives on the fringes of society and makes money as a low-level boxer in an underground boxing society. He finds a way to sort of infiltrate the highest powers of the country and seek revenge for his mother, who was killed by the police chief and his higher-ups years earlier. So basically a revenge film, but there's a lot more to it than that. Tons of influences too, like which we'll get into.
Yeah, that's why I really like this idea of doing a month of movies about a particular actor or a particular filmmaker, because you start to see patterns. And as you're watching Monkey Man, you can absolutely see not only who Dev Patel is as an actor, but choices that he's made and ways he's been influenced in the way he directed it. But also, you can see a pattern in the stories that he chooses to even be involved in. He very much likes underdog stories. He very much likes coming of age stories. He really seems to like movies in which you also follow a child, or as a child actor having tragedy and dealing with that. I mean, those are things that kind of go throughout most of the movies that he's involved in. So I think all that's really interesting. He brought that to this project, which is almost the summation of all of those things now. And you can see almost every movie he's acted in or been involved in coming out in this project.
In a weird way, this feels like it could be a follow-up to Slumdog Millionaire. I mean, I know some of the facts don't line up, but he loses a mother that is sort of on his own. Maybe in this world he loses all of the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire money. I don't know, and he's forced to go fight or something. But it very much feels in line with that film and that story, and maybe it's the setting.
Well, you could see it more as a parallel path in a way.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a similar story where if he wasn't as pure of heart, if he didn't have a love of his life he was searching for and didn't win Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, this is very much where that character could have ended up and just had his mindset on revenge. And so you could almost see it as just a parallel path of a similar character.
There's one scene in particular that really felt like Slumdog, and that's when they steal the woman's wallet.
They're going to say the same thing. I think we're going to say the exact same scene. Yeah, the wallet theft scene. Yeah, so influenced by Slumdog, you feel like.
I loved seeing that. It felt so. I mean, there are a million influences, like very much on the surface of this film, and like you said, even from Dev Patel's filmography. But that one was just so overt, and it just felt like it like a cut scene from that film. We just watched that, so
exactly, handheld camera running through the streets, following people and all this movement and kind of tracking it along with it. Yeah, I felt very much exactly the way Slumdog was filmed. So yeah, I mean, that was pretty obvious. We both obviously saw that as it was happening. But yeah, it made me smile. This is one of those things where, look, we know filmmakers, there's hardly anything new under the sun, right? And everyone's using their influences. I mean, we know who Tarantino steals from and people who steal from him, and we know all this. So the only thing that matters is, can you take all these influences that you have and turn it into something that feels different and somewhat original. And I think that he does a really good job of that, because he's bringing in his love of film, all of the influences he's worked with, but also a love of a certain element of Indian culture, which brings an added element to this, especially for someone like me who's very unfamiliar with their stories and their mythology. So it was really interesting for me to see all of that in this movie. It's like everything he seems to love, movies, mythology, martial arts movies, all wrapped into this stew. And he leaves it, every inch of himself in this movie. That's the way that I feel.
Yeah, he really puts it all out there. And that Indian culture kind of plays a part in the production troubles that it has.
Right.
Which,
yeah. So let's so we can get into the saga of this movie itself, which, as I said, is really interesting. If you like getting behind the scenes of filmmaking. So I mean, he's had this idea since apparently 2014. Started working on this script. Showed it to a few people. Actually, showed it to the director of Chappie, because he thought that he might want that guy to direct it for him. Neil Blomkamp, is that
Neil Blomkamp?
Yeah, yep. Blomkamp. He had considered having him direct it, and he convinced Dev Patel basically to direct it himself, because it was just something that he saw in his own head. But so he's been working on this project on and off for almost 5 years at that point. It was supposed to start filming in 2020. And again, the theme of Dev Patel seems to be that so many things for him went sideways because of the pandemic. So
Yeah.
I didn't realize how much of his life was been sidetracked because of the pandemic.
What a horrible time to have a moment.
Yeah, and here's another one. So wanted to start filming in 2020. It got sidetracked because of the pandemic. Ends up not being able to film it in India, which was his plan. Ends up having to film on an island in Indonesia about a year later. I think they ended up filming it like 6 or 8 months later. So that already it's off the rails. I'm sure everyone's read random things about how many injuries he had, breaking his hand, breaking his toes. So you're dealing with all the injury stuff. But the interesting part to me as well is that because of COVID and because the set had to be locked down, they only had about 10 or 11 actual stuntmen in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So what you see, it makes me think of Commando, where it was just like a few guys and then he would kill them and they would come back wearing a mustache or something.
Yeah.
This was very much like that too. They only have 11 guys. So in the sequences that you see that have just tons of action and a bunch of people, half those people are just people being recycled, coming back in different costumes and continuing to fight, which I always find pretty amusing. So the stuntmen put in a ton of work in this movie because they did not have a lot of them.
Also in the minimum resources department, I saw an interview with Dev where he said that in the sort of the VIP room scenes, they only had so many tables with breakaway tabletops that were glass. So they would do some shots where they'd break the tables. They'd have to cut and glue them back together. Like they'd have to get on the floor and look for the pieces and put them together like a puzzle and glue them again so that they could reshoot and do it over and over again. So very limited budget. I mean, $10 million, even without the problems that you encounter on a shoot like this, $10 million isn't a lot. And I think he did a really great job with that amount of money. It sounds like he had to put in a lot of effort to get what he got with $10 million. There were a lot of camera issues, and they were sort of isolated, so they couldn't really get new cameras, and they couldn't get more money to get new cameras. So a couple scenes are shot either on iPhones or GoPro cameras, which is pretty wild. I guess not so wild these days, but kind of cool to know. And you know, there's a lot of improvisation with the tools, which is pretty neat.
Yeah, it's a good example of making your movie come hell or high water. You start with big ambitions and normal cameras, and you end up with puzzle piece glass tables and iPhones. I mean, you do what you have to do to get to the end of the shoot.
Yeah,
that very much seems to be here. He's dragging his broken body and one iPhone across the finish line just to get this movie finished.
Yeah,
and that's the thing. In some ways, it benefits from that because it all feels very immediate and dirty and just kind of very gritty. And what I found, in watching it, that there's a lot of things that the movie goes in and out of focus in a lot of times, and I think that's deliberate. But it feels very unsettling, where certain scenes, he'll go out of focus or something will be out of focus, and you just feel like constantly in motion.
Yeah. Where
it feels like his life is chaos until, well, I think you mentioned this as well, but the first half of the movie is very chaotic in terms of how the camera's moving, and all of that. And as he gains confidence, it's like the movie slows down a little bit, which it matches the way the character is moving forward. Like as he starts to understand what he's fighting for and gains a certain amount of confidence about what he's about to undertake, the movie itself slows down a little bit. But that initial hour is kind of all over the place, and you feel it as you're watching it. It's just it feels like your head is spinning because everything's moving, everything's happening so fast, things are turning sideways, and you feel very disoriented.
Yeah, I think the camera work is for the most part intentional. I heard him talk about how it's a little shaky at the beginning because he's a little shaky, and then as he goes on,
that's cool. I definitely noticed that. You definitely feel that as you're watching.
Yeah, it's also the editing is sort of a rough point for the film, I think. Maybe not the shot cuts so much, but just the editing in general. It seems like they had a lot to work with and really chopped it up, maybe between Netflix and where it landed. And actually, we should say that Netflix paid $30 million for this. It had a $10 million budget. Netflix bought it for $30 million. And they, without maybe knowing what it was, I guess, because when they realized that, they have a big Indian audience. And so there's a lot about...
So let's get into the Red Dawn of it all.
Yeah, really.
That's what it made me think of.
Yeah,
so for
sure.
anybody who doesn't remember this, there was a lousy 2012 remake of Red Dawn, which was a movie from '84, which Steve and I both watched as kids.
By the way, it proves my point that you don't remake a Patrick Swayze film. You don't do it.
It's true. We may end up doing an episode on that, of all the ways that making a Patrick Swayze movie can go wrong. It's three for three that I think were inferior to the originals, but
yeah.
that's all now. But so in 2012, they went to remake Red Dawn, and the original villain, because in the original '84, villain was Russia invading America, which makes sense. Make it in 2012, and they decided to make it China, but because they were so afraid of losing that China money, which studios are chasing, where they want to make sure that they get this movie shown in China, at the last second, they change everything to make North Korea the villain.
Yeah.
And it's just very, you can obviously see that things were changed, and it just felt very silly and just kind of tanked the whole movie. And made it even dumber than it actually was.
There's a lot of digital post-production that's pretty obvious.
Right. Yeah. So it wasn't even good to begin with, and this did not help. So this movie, and you know, Dev Patel in this instance, not only was he trying to make an action movie, but he was really trying to make, a political statement in certain ways. He had something specific he wanted to say, and he wanted to talk about the caste system in India, and talk about who's in power and how they're using religion to oppress people. And I'm not that familiar with what's going on in India or Indian culture, so this is all a bit. So it was a bit new for me. I mean, I know the broad outlines of it, but he was very much trying to make a statement about the Modi government, which we won't get too deep into. But turns out that Netflix is trying to chase that Indian money, and they had some issues with this. So I think that what you're seeing here is a compromise from what its original intent was. And there are all these little changes that people smarter than me have realized about the colors of the political parties and how certain things are talked about to kind of mask who it probably actually talking about to make this a little more vague.
Yeah, they actually changed saffron as the color of the opposition party, I believe, in India, and they changed it to red in the film. I think this is sometime between when Netflix had it and Universal got a hold of it. I don't know about the political stuff in the film. I don't know that it really fits for me so much. I think it's definitely something that should be talked about. And it does seem like there's a 1-for-1 with the people in power in India right now. Like you, I don't know a lot about it. I just know that the Prime Minister Modi is sort of in charge, and he's very right wing. And so there's a big Hindu-Muslim kind of divide, and
using a divide and conquer way of leading to kind of make these other people the enemies. He's doing that with transgender people and anyone who is considered pure in terms of what he considers a true Indian. So there's all of that, and that's an interesting element to this movie as well, which I didn't know anything about. It's there's an element of what's called the third gender in India,
the Hijra,
and they play a prominent role in this film, where they end up being the people that take him in, where he kind of rehabilitates and learns not only how to fight better, but also how to channel his true purpose. And they end up playing a big role in the climax of the film. But I mean, I didn't know anything about that. And the truth is, these are things that aren't necessary really to watch the movie. If you're interested in it, it's interesting stuff to think about, and if you want to dive deeper into it. But as far as the movie goes, it hits enough bases where you understand peripherally or enough of what's going on. But the truth is, like anything, it's about bad guys who are oppressing people and people with no power trying to regain power. So it's a story as old as time, and you can watch it just for that, and it's fine. You get enough.
I didn't know about the Hijra, the third gender people in India, and I didn't know how this representation would be taken because I wasn't aware of them. And from the things I read online, it's very well received, which I think is great. I'm really happy about that. They are sort of at the center of like what I think is one of the coolest scenes of the film, which is the Rocky-esque training montage. And that, like the wallet scene, they both feel like scenes to me that were kind of there already and not chopped up down the road. Like that's what the film could have been. But I really like them. And I really like that storyline. I mean, you have like these basically non-binary priest warriors, which is super awesome. I love that. I mean, they play a role in the end, which is so cool. So I love seeing them.
You could make a spin-off or a sequel just about them, because that's kind of an interesting thing. They get pushed out and relegated to the woods almost, where they try to hold on to their culture, and it's just this ancient warrior tribe. So that stuff is pretty interesting. I love the training montage, of course, because I'm a sucker for training montages. But he also mentioned specifically that you can't make an action movie without a training montage,
right,
as we all know. I mean, Rocky, sets the template for action movies. You have to have it. So, and this one again, feels familiar, but it has a twist because it's very much of Indian culture. Using different kinds of rhythms, and the way he's training against the bongo drums and with a bag of rice. Just all these things that make it just different enough to make it seem pretty interesting. And I really enjoyed that part. But clearly he's a guy who knows his movies. He loves his action movies, and he's taking all these little pieces. So if I were to ask you, what's the movie you feel that this movie most reminded you of? If you wanted to pull the highlights of where you think.
Ooh. Gosh, there's so many influences to it that I don't know. I think, they even name check John Wick in it. And I think to call it an Indian John Wick or something is pretty reductive, because I don't think it really has, other than sort of the stylized look to it, I don't think there's a lot of John Wick in it. I don't know. Like The Raid is a big one.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. The movie that took in my mind most as I was watching it was probably The Raid.
Yeah.
Which The Raid was a Korean movie that came out in 2011. I mean, John Wick came out in 2014. I think John Wick owes a lot to The Raid.
Yeah. And
I think that this movie has a lot of that in it, especially where at the end he kind of starts in the bottom and he's working his way up to where he has to get to at the end, which is very much what the entire movie The Raid was about. So I think The Raid is just hugely influential on almost any action movie that's come out in the past, the past decade at least. There's no doubt about it. So.
Yeah, and that of course comes from Bruce Lee's The Game of Death too.
Exactly. Yeah, it goes back to right. Going back to Game of Death. The Raid kind of perfected what Game of Death had laid out.
If only Kareem Abdul-Jabbar would have been washing his feet at the top floor, that would have been amazing.
So obscure. Here's an obscure parallel that I kind of saw as I was watching it. I'm sure. I mean, I can't be sure one way or the other. I don't think this was an influence on the movie, but what it really reminded me of was The Hustler.
Oh,
maybe think of The Hustler with Paul Newman, because it's very much a similar story in that way, where it starts off with failure in a way. The idea is that he fails because he doesn't truly understand why he wants to succeed.
Right.
In a way, he knows that he wants revenge, but he doesn't truly understand what it really means for him or what it could mean to other people. And The Hustler is very much like that, where he thinks he's the best and he loses in that first match. And it breaks him. And what he has to do is he has to come all the way around to understanding what his real purpose is, what he really needs from it, rather than just this selfish idea of just thinking he's great and wanting to be the best. And it takes almost a whole movie for him to get there. And so that's what I was thinking about as I was watching it. It's kind of a person taking purely selfish motives out of something and trying to find the true purpose of what makes them need to succeed. And that's where he has to get to in order to actually fulfill what he wants. Yeah. So that's so made me think of Hustler.
You might be the only person to cite The Hustler as a Monkey Man influence of all the things I've read. That's pretty great.
Is it possible that he hasn't seen The Hustler? It's possible. I mean, it may be just totally what I'm seeing. That's what I was saying.
That's awesome. I just want to go back to that training montage real quick because the tabla player is Zakir Hussain, and this guy's like all time when it comes to tabla players in India. He's like the guy, and he gets that scene at the beginning when Dev Patel first gets to the monastery, and he does that whole tabla scene of like the man and the woman talking through the drums. And I kept thinking, this is way too long for this scene. Like, why is this guy getting so much screen time? And then, it comes into play as he's basically the Mickey of Dev Patel's character through playing the tabla. And I just think it's so cool that to train in that way. And I think it's so cool that Zakir Hussain is in it. I mean, this guy, he's played with George Harrison. He's played with Grateful Dead. He's even on the Apocalypse Now soundtrack. Like,
really? I think that's why the scene was so long, because in a way, he's the most famous person in the entire movie.
Oh yeah, it made sense down the road. Yeah,
he's a huge star. So in a way, he's the biggest person in the whole movie. But let me just pause and say, this is where I embarrass myself with my lack of cultural knowledge, where I call it a bongo drum, but it's a tabla. But people get into that. I didn't say I know stuff about everything. That's fine.
Yeah, they're two little drums, and I love the sound of them. Like, I could really go deep on tabla because I really, really love them. They just have such a wobbly sound to them that are really cool. And I love kind of a tangent, but way back in the day, I remember Jeff Buckley talking about this guy he loved called Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, who's from Pakistan, and he's a Qawwali singer. Basically called him like the Pakistani Elvis. And per Buckley's recommendation, I started really getting into this guy. And he had this tabla player, Baydar Hussain, or Dildar Hussain, I think. And it just, like, I was just entranced by this instrument. It was so cool. So I was really happy to, like, see tabla in this film because it's just such a cool instrument. And, man, I can't remember a movie where I've ever seen a tabla that's not from India. So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I just realized that we got way off topic. We come back to the story of the movie where we forgot to mention Jordan Peele.
Yeah,
kind of being the savior of this movie,
right?
In a lot of ways. So Netflix decides it's a little too hot for them, and they end up deciding not to release the movie at all. So there's that, and then Jordan Peele sees it and loves it.
Yeah, and he convinces Paramount. I don't know if he has like a first look deal through Monkey Paw Productions, his company, with I'm sorry, not Paramount, Universal. But they pick it up, I think, for like $9 million. So Netflix is really taking a bath on this. I mean, they paid $30 million for it, and they sold it for $9 million. So definitely a loss of money. And one thing I'll say is that I've researched this film for the past like week, and I've watched a ton of interviews. Jordan Peele is a hell of a salesman. This guy is like out there for this film. You'd think this is the best movie ever made, and Dev Patel is like the next Scorsese if you're listening to Jordan Peele. So I was like, yeah, let's go. I'm into this film. He kind of oversold it for me, but he's really like pushing it, and he has a vested interest in it, so I get it. But he, the one interview that I watched with him talking to Dev Patel, they kind of talk about how he basically re-edited the film, at least like the last act, to bring out something that maybe Dev didn't have in it, or didn't put together the right way. So that's kind of interesting. But I mean, you can, like I said, you can see a ton of editing in this. And really, the third act almost goes like straight John Wick in a way, like a little more so than the rest of the film. But you can see Jordan Peele's sort of fingerprint on it, and I would love to see it, unedited or the original cut, just to see what he did to it.
Yeah, I would hope that eventually we get to see something closer to exactly what the original vision was, because I think that's probably a pretty damn interesting movie. But so we're talking about the last sequence, which does have, every action movie has to figure out a way to be slightly different from the ones that came before it. Yeah, and this one, of course, involves Kid's character stabbing someone using his teeth instead of his hands,
Yeah.
which was pretty damn cool. I have to say that was a new one. I hadn't seen that one before, and I guess so. It's worth mentioning the person who was the stunt coordinator on this. Someone that I wasn't aware of. His name is Raheem Chaub, and he ends up coming into this because originally another thing that ends up having to change because of the pandemic. They were originally going to use the same stunt guys that did John Wick, and then that ends up falling apart because of COVID. And then they have to go to an island, and they go to this guy who, from looking at what he'd done in the past, wasn't a ton of stuff. He mostly worked as a stuntman and not necessarily as a coordinator. So, I mean, for me, this is very much a coming out for him, because this stuff was really interesting to look at. And as I said, just figuring out little ways to tweak things that we've already seen before. And there were enough things to keep this interesting. Just the use of, any item anywhere, just kind of a DIY sense of fighting, where he's always just desperate to kind of find anything to use to his advantage, and all that was pretty cool.
Yeah, there is a lot of mouth work. He uses his mouth to bite that knife and stab the guy, but he's also fighting another dude and bites his nose twice. So he really utilizes the mouth as a weapon. And I just want to say, speaking of fight scenes, there's a fight scene in a brothel where he's fighting a dude with an axe, and some poor soul walks by to go to the bathroom, the only time you see him in the movie, and he just gets an axe in the throat and he's done. And I just felt so bad for that poor guy. He's like, I'm just trying to get to the can.
The lesson is, if people are fighting with an axe, hold it in. That's the lesson.
Yeah, maybe don't walk right by them.
You might want to wait.
That really jumped out at me, and it was very funny. And I just felt, oh, this poor guy. But yeah, there are so many good fight scenes and really shot in interesting ways.
But again, the thing that was interesting to me was, unlike something like The Raid, which is just nuts from start to finish. I mean, this is sold as an action movie, and there's great action in it. But what was interesting to me was there's really only 3 major sequences of action in the movie, and in a 2-hour movie, a lot of it is quieter than that. A lot of it is backstory, and a lot of it is said about Indian culture and about this larger issue of who's being oppressed and why, and giving us his mission. So while it is an action movie, there's a little bit more to it than that. It's definitely trying. I'd say it's more of an underdog story than it is an action movie, and I think that's deliberate. And as we've seen, Dev Patel, it specializes in underdog stories. It seems to be what he's best at. So, that's so. Out of the whole movie, maybe only 25 minutes of it are pure action. Of course, that action is excellent, and the last sequence is pretty amazing to watch. But it's definitely more to it than that.
I just thought of there's you asked me what it reminded me of the most, and I just remembered there's a scene in the Netflix show Daredevil in one of the episodes where he's in this hallway. It almost reminds me of Old Boy a little bit. Like he's walking down this hallway fighting, I don't know, like 20 guys, and it's all a single shot, and it's like really, really outstanding. I can see a little bit of that in this too, but I think that's sort of an Old Boy influence. Again, so many influences there. But you mentioned that it's a 2-hour movie, and I feel like could have 15 minutes cut out of it, maybe.
Possibly. And again, it depends on the movie that you're trying to make. I think that he was still trying really hard to make the movie that he wanted to make, which was an underdog story and a message movie about the oppression that goes on in India. And that kind of butts up against the movie that probably Netflix wanted, which was another John Wick. And so you're seeing the warring sides of that. And so you end up getting a movie that is a little bit long, might drag a little, but has a purpose, and it's very specific to what he was trying to do. So that's what I'm getting from.
Yeah, Dev Patel said that there are, which is not surprising, like a ton of cut scenes, and they're all going to be on the DVD release. So it'll be interesting to see what got cut out, and maybe that'll help some things to be a little smoother, like if they were in there. I don't know.
Well, let's hope it's a re-edit and not. I mean, I like this movie, but I do not want to see a 3-hour cut of Monkey Man.
Yeah,
that would not be helpful for this.
No. Yeah, no. As I understand it, it'll be deleted scenes. So hopefully not the Snyder cut of Monkey Man.
Yeah, exactly.
One person who really stands out in this film, also from Chappie and District 9, kind of came up with Neil Blomkamp, is Charlton Copley, who plays the ring announcer at the boxing matches. And this guy is just gold. Like, he's so good. He's so slimy and just, like, fantastic at what he does. And in one of the interviews I saw with Dev, he said that they had written a few lines out for him, and then they just let him cook with, like, improvisation. And everything he says is, like, amazing. This dude is so good. I really hope we can see... Actually, you know what? We will see him next month in another film that we're going to talk about, I think. So, yeah, I don't know if we want to reveal it or not, but we haven't really decided on it.
I don't even know, so we'll be surprised.
Okay.
I'll be surprised with everybody.
Okay.
We'll wait.
Okay.
Surprised.
But he's just so sensational in this film. And I would love a film just about him, his character, because he's just so great.
So for me, I think we're talking about a debut film, but by a debut filmmaker, and the most important thing for a debut film is to have a vision and have someone who's confident in what they're doing. What I was interested in reading a lot about this and hearing about it is that the character is almost a reflection of Dev Patel, where he says that he deals with self-confidence issues and things like that, and that's what the character is kind of going through as well. But I find that really fascinating because what you see here is a filmmaker who doesn't seem to have any self-doubt. I mean, he seems very self-assured for a person making their first movie. At 33, I mean, 30 when he started it probably. It shows a confidence about what to do with a film. And it has a vision, and it has a specific vision about what he wants to bring to the screen. And that's what I felt. That there was a filmmaker bringing everything that they've done and putting it into a piece of work. And I think that this bodes really well for him going forward in terms of being a filmmaker. And the other thing that I was thinking, hearing about his career, is that, again, what you're coming at with this is someone creating an opening for themselves. He's been trying hard to kind of get into the action space and finding it hard because everybody sees him in a particular way. I guess they only see him making coming of age stories and things that are specific to being Indian, which he said he's dealt with a lot, getting that, not being open to being I don't think Dev Patel's going to get offered James Bond or things like that, which are things he might probably be really good at. But it's unfortunate that he's kind of pigeonholed in certain ways. And so I think that what you have here is an actor becoming a filmmaker to create opportunities for themselves they're not going to get in any other way. And I think he takes full advantage of that in giving us a completely different version of him as an actor. And I really hope this opens more doors to him because, I mean, as we've talked about repeatedly in Dev Patel month, I mean, I love watching his work. I think he's really a fantastic actor. And I would love to see more opportunities for him to stretch out and do more things. more varied work. And I think that's what he deserves.
Yeah, he's such a good actor. I mean, he has so much charisma, and even in watching interviews, like he just seems like the best guy. I'm really on board. As I mentioned in our first episode this month, he's always been a bit of a blind spot for me. And what I've learned so far in doing these films is that he's just solid. I mean, he's good in everything he does, whether that's an ensemble or, kind of a solo act. And I love that he's created a film where he's basically giving himself representation because he doesn't find opportunities to do that elsewhere. And I think he's going to keep doing that. And representation for other people, too. I mean, I can't remember the last time I've seen a film set in India in America. I mean, I guess it was Slumdog Millionaire. Like, right.
Which was probably the first at that time, because I couldn't think of one before that. So
yeah.
Right.
So I think it's really cool. I mean,
maybe $1 Million Arm with John Hamm, that baseball
right.
movie with John Hamm. I think that's another one that comes to mind.
And his older brother in Slumdog was in $1 Million Arm.
Actually, you know who else was in it? Give 1 second.
Was Lake Bell in that?
I'm pretty sure she was.
Oh,
But,
my favorite.
But yeah, you know who else was actually in that movie? The person that plays Alfonso in this movie, the person that kind of ends up becoming embroiled in his revenge saga, who ends up getting him into the club. That character, he was also a $1 Million Arm, if I remember right. So yeah, I have no idea what his name is, and I remember the character's name was Alfonso, but that guy.
Yeah, $1 Million Arm. That's right. So that's 3 films set in India that are American films, I guess, in 15 years?
That's all that I can think of. So here would be fun. So I was thinking about specific shots in the movie that I immediately thought of. Oh, that's definitely must be where he got that from. So there's a one scene in the trailer where he's backdropped with the red behind him, which is in the trailer and actually in the poster, which immediately made me think of Kill Bill, which I'm sure probably made you think of Kill Bill as well.
Oh yeah.
But there's a scene towards the end where he's walking through an archway, and the shot kind of goes through the archway, and that was exactly like the shot in Green Knight at the beginning of Green Knight.
Oh yeah.
When you first walk into the castle where they are.
Right.
So that felt very much like almost that same exact shot was in Green Knight. And the puppet show made me laugh too.
Yeah.
Which I talked about before, that I love a good puppet show in a movie. So I was happy to see another puppet show. That was kind of fun.
By the way, the poster, Monkey Man opened this weekend. Also opening was The First Omen, which is some legacy sequel to The Omen. Also a silhouette in a red door frame. So if you see like things that came out this week, the posters are, I mean, they're not identical, but you have 2 films, 2 red doors, 2 silhouettes. Kind of interesting because I just happen to see them side by side, and I'm like, wow, this is really the theme for April is silhouette in the red door. So I guess he borrowed the poster from The First Omen.
Or they hired the same marketing team, and they were like, you know what? We're going red in the doorway. This is what we're doing.
April to us. Yeah.
Sure. Maybe it's got a little Easter resurrection in there somewhere. Who knows? Who can say?
Well, the Omen one, the way it's set up is the silhouette in the door casts a giant shadow to the bottom of the poster, and it's a big crucifix. So there you go. There probably is some Easter influence in there. We don't have numbers for the weekend yet for this film, so I can't really say what it did overall. But I do have the Friday numbers, which we can go over. And so far, so good on Rotten Tomatoes. The critic score is 87 and the audience score is 83. It'll be interesting to see how much that changes, because I want to know, with a bigger sample size, I guess, like what audiences think about this, like getting through some of the editing and some of the stuff in it. I wonder if that score is going to go up or down. I suspect it'll drop a little bit, but
Yeah, again, I think that if it's being sold as a John Wick type movie, that you're not getting exactly that. And it depends on how people will take to the stuff about a culture they may or not be familiar with. But we've talked about this in the past as well. And I think that's really is why I like this movie and why I like going to the movies, because again, there's only so many stories under the sun.
Right.
But what you want to do is see something that's different, that adds a new twist to something that's old, or introduces you to something that you're not familiar with. And this opened up a ton of things that I really did not know anything about. I mean, starting with the deity that the whole story even starts with. The Monkey King. It's called Hanuman.
Hanuman.
Hanuman, which is totally unfamiliar to me.
Yeah.
So even that, it's kind of all these little things. So it opens up a whole door to a culture that I'm really not familiar with, and I think that's what's fun about it, in being able to wrap a little bit of history and mysticism and culture into an action movie, and give you some stuff that you're not necessarily familiar with. So for me, that's what I love about going to the movies. Whether everybody feels that way, I have no idea, but we'll see.
Yeah. Do you wish he would have worn his monkey mask for the whole third act?
I was a little disappointed how quickly he took it off. Yeah, I did think that. He shows up, you see him in it,
Yeah.
and then he just takes it off immediately. I'm like, what? Yeah, I did have a moment where I was like, he should at least have worn it until somebody ripped it off
Right.
in a fighting sequence. I would have liked that more.
Yeah, because he bleached it and it was like white now, and they show him for like one shot and then it's gone. I kind of wish that dog would have come back somehow too. Like I would have loved to see him be trained to, bite a leg or something and then kind of help him out up on the top floor or something. But no justice for that dog. He kind of was lost.
Good that they didn't kill the dog though, because that would have been way too John Wick.
Oh, I was waiting for it. I was like, please don't kill this dog. That's gonna.
It did cross my mind, but I think they realized that would have been too on the nose. So.
Yeah. Not only for John Wick, but just in general. I mean, don't kill a dog on screen. That's not cool. So on Friday, the film did pretty well. Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire, came in number one.
The X is silent. It's just Godzilla Kong, New Empire.
Oh, the old silent X. Yep. Okay. Good to know. I never know what to do with the X.
Yeah.
Everything has an X now. That did pretty well. That made $8.5 million on Friday.
Would it hurt my standing if I told you that I saw that movie too? I saw it before I saw Monkey Man.
Oh.
So.
No, I mean, I think, people dig it. Monkey Man did come in second with 4.2 million. I think it's projected to make like 10 to 12 million opening weekend. So it's going to make its budget back opening weekend, which is great. Number 3 behind it was The First Omen, which I mentioned, 3.2 million. Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, 2.4 million in the number 4 slot. And Kung Fu Panda comes in at number 5 with 2.3 million. Monkey Man stands out in this top 5 because it's the only thing not based on a past property,
right? Which
I think is kind of interesting. So hopefully, we'll see more things like it. Although I guess if 4 of the top 5 are IP that's already been put out there, they're probably just going to keep making that stuff.
Yeah, and speaking of, I mean, the question becomes, after watching Monkey Man, what will happen from here? Whether or not he'll want to continue telling these stories. And the movie ends in a very ambiguous way, which does make you wonder, where it's going to go, without giving anything away. So we'll see, and we'll see whether or not audiences take to it, and whether or not it'll warrant a sequel. So we'll see if it's got some Beekeeper energy, where just kind of breaks out, and then it seems obvious that a sequel will be on the way.
I'm glad you mentioned the Beekeeper, because that reminded me that I kept thinking when watching Monkey Man, like, this guy's the head of a country, and this kid can just get in this building where this dude is hanging out. Like, India has so many people in it, and it's a huge government. I would think there would be so much protection. And it made me ask myself, could somebody get into a room where Biden is hanging out and, start shit like this? And then I remembered The Beekeeper, where the beekeeper actually does do just that. He gets into this Camp David party or something to get to the president. So I guess, yeah, the answer is yes.
The answer is, in movies, absolutely. So for me, in this instance, it was easier to suspend disbelief because, again, I don't know enough about India. So I'm like, sure, maybe things are chaos in India and people can just walk right in because, things are messy and no one knows for sure where everybody is. So I don't know. I was willing to go with it. And especially after The Beekeeper, I'll go with anything. Fine.
But then the main guy, I don't think he's really giving anything away that's a plot point, but the main guy is just like all alone hanging out when he comes across Dev Patel. So
I don't know. Well, maybe because he was waiting for him. Maybe he was just deciding that he wanted to get him once and for all. I have no idea. That felt very Game of Death, where it's kind of like just one guy is waiting.
Yeah.
He wants to finish it himself. I could almost go with that.
Maybe all the security was just used up on the subsequent floors.
Maybe. Or it would have been helpful to have a scene where someone asks him, do you want me to stay with you? And he's like, no, I want to do this myself. I want to, squash this rat once and for all. That
was probably cut out.
Yeah, I could imagine that being a cut scene because that felt right to me to be done in that way. That's a very action movie thing to do.
Yeah, although that guy really had sort of a prescient look at what would happen because he told the police chief, like, one ember can burn everything down. So he sort of knew what was coming. So you would think he would have had more security. I don't know. Don't overthink it.
Prophetic and ignorant at the same time. It happens.
Yeah. Wow. So Monkey Man, it's here. We saw it. We talked about it.
And we recommend it. I think it's definitely worth a watch. I think everyone should try to go see it. And go see it in the theater. It's as we say all the time, it's fun. So it's worth going to check out on the big screen.
Yeah, and I think it's just a solid debut for a director. I mean, it's one of the more ambitious debuts I've seen. I don't think everything works in it necessarily, but I love the big swing. And
that's the point. I think that when you take big swings, you might fail a little bit, and that's okay. I'd rather see someone go ambitious and bite off more than they can chew than go safe, which we see all the time now because everybody's trying to niche down or chase audience or work with the algorithms. Where this one's just he had a vision of what he wanted to tell, went for it. Doesn't always work, but I would rather see this 9 times out of 10 than something that plays it much more safe. And even knowing that they did play it safe because they ended up cutting it down into something that was more palatable.
Yeah.
So I think the original swing was even bigger than this. So, I'm always on board for that.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of...
You want something safe? You got shows on TV that you can watch, every day of the week.
Right.
So
I have to say, I know you're not looking forward to it, but I kind of am looking forward to the Patel cut. I want to see 3 hours. I want to see what happened, So, could keep my eyes open.
I would love to see certain scenes added, certain scenes taken away. I'm willing to go 215 on Monkey Man and get a real good movie. But I don't want to go more than that because, an action movie should only be so long.
Yeah, that's
we haven't discussed this in the past, but I have very strong beliefs about how long certain genres of movies should be. And I just can't see when an action movie starts pushing over 2 hours, you get into something else there. That's actually rough.
I mean, by its nature, it should have a faster pace, right? Because it's action. You shouldn't need as long to tell a quicker story. Good.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, well, that's that. And we're going to wrap up Dev Patel month next week with this is actually going to be pretty fun in contrast to The Monkey Man. The Personal History of David Copperfield, which is a very different film. Although I could see David Copperfield in an underground boxing league, to make a little money here and there while he's figuring out how to be a writer.
You definitely could end it there. There's much less knife play in David Copperfield than in Monkey Man.
And no gun fu. Yeah. So, yeah, look for that next week. And in the meantime, check us out on social. We are Movie Throwdown Pod everywhere. Thanks so much for listening, and we will talk to you next time. So long.